Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's either listening live or if you're listening to this on playback. My name's Brian Chapman. I'm joined with my colleague Sophia Wopperet from AkzoNobel. And we're just going to talk a little bit about our experience of implementing a large engagement project, an initiative, and a little bit around the impact that it's had so far within our company, which is AkzoNobel. Before we just get started, if you want to write any Q&As on in the chat and use the chat, that's also fine. And also, if you want to be able to listen in your own language, there is the caption facility, which is at the bottom of the screen. So before we tell you a little bit about the engagement survey that we're running, just a very brief introduction to AkzoNobel and the company it is, who we are. We're a paints and coatings company within the chemical industry, roughly around 10-11 billion in terms of annual revenue, roughly around 35,000 employees, and we're present in all continents. And I mentioned we do paints and coatings, and we do almost all of the segments. So from coating your computers to coating buildings and inside of buildings, planes, trains, automobiles, that sort of thing. So quite a range of different sectors in which we play. Just in terms of the engagement program that we've had within the company, we've had probably around 20 years worth now of having some form of engagement survey on an annual basis. From the early noughties, having what you might call the more traditional employee survey, covering maybe 100 questions on a range of different topics. And then towards the end of the noughties, moving more towards an engagement survey, so a fairly short survey, which each team could review the results from, and really getting sort of local engagement present as an initiative. As we came to the end of the teens, just before 2020, we then looked to widen the concept more towards an organizational health, also considering how well the processes are working within the company. And then after COVID, it was also looking to try and get something which could motivate teams again to talk about their local experiences, but on a more dynamic basis than our previous employee survey had done. And so then we started looking at what options might be available for continuous listening. And that's not to say that we've necessarily mastered any of these particular areas, but it gives you a little bit of an understanding of the history and the journey that we've been on as a company. So Sophia is going to just share a little bit now of our journey then into selecting and choosing Eletive as a provider, and the experience that we've had so far running the survey for a couple of years. So Sophia, over to you. And just maybe before we go through the details, this might sound obvious in some ways. The questions then, if you're considering either starting an employee survey or changing, some fundamental questions which are maybe quite useful just to really question hard for the organization. Why are we really wanting to do this? What are we wanting to get from it? And what are we therefore prepared to put into it to get that sort of result? If you're going to run it and get the answers that maybe you're expecting, maybe you're not, how can you then integrate those into your normal processes? And from a manager's perspective, to make sure you get good uptake, really thinking through why should a manager spend their time on it, and how, in your view, do you think they should be using it to be able to further improve themselves in their own role? So Sophia, I'll just hand over to you to just share a little bit about the implementation within Akzo.
Yes, thanks, Brian, and hey everyone. Maybe just to add on to the introduction earlier, one of the reasons, obviously, Brian and I both work in HR, but one of the reasons why I'm going to be taking you through the selection process, but also about talking about the implementation process, is because at the time I was actually one of the team members, the program manager to run the implementation, which feels like ages ago, but it's all coming back as part of getting ready for this presentation. So as mentioned, so moving away from what Brian had mentioned, the last survey that we ran was more around the organizational health. And really the key driver around selecting a new tool or a new platform was centered around empowering our people managers who are really at the core, at the center of their team's engagement. So the remaining selection criteria that were important to us and that you can see on the slide here were really all sort of centered around that idea of people manager empowerment. The dashboards really needed to be easy to understand and user-friendly, making sure that our blue collar, or what we call offline employee organization, were approached and reached was very essential to us. Then having a strong benchmark data, specifically we're a manufacturing company in the chemist industry, like Brian said. So really to help us understand and validate our results, but also the actions that we would take from the survey was important to us. And then as an international company, you've seen on the slide that we operate in many different countries. Making sure that all languages that our employees speak, because not all of them, of course, are fluent in English, was a very important selection criteria for us, and making sure that also the learnings and the suggested actions and action planning that they could do in the platform would be supported in their native language was a very important selection criteria. And then, as you can see on the bottom, some extras or some nice to haves, if you want to call it that, like the chat functionality or employee lifecycle surveys was something that we were hoping for, but maybe not necessarily aiming for. But in the end, Eletive was then the one vendor or the one provider being selected, because they actually check all the boxes on all those selection criteria that were important to us and that you can see on the slide. Then if we look at the objectives and the path that we set out on, it had a clear 3-year focus, and I'm just going to browse over it. So 2023 was all about the implementation and really running the first survey. For this, we put a cross-functional team with colleagues from HR, culture and change, communications, IT in place on our end. And of course, we had an amazing implementation team from Eletive helping us. And I do want to take a moment to for a shout out to the customer success managers, Diana, Madeleine, and Emily, who helped us along the way to make this become a reality and become a success. In 2024, the focus was on further developing the platform, learning, of course, from the insights that we gained, and building a strong engagement foundation. And all of this with sort of the clear aim to fully integrate employee engagement in our ways of working as of 2025, like we do with performance management and talent management. And on the bottom, you can see some of the key metrics that we put in place for the implementation 2023. So we really were aiming for a participation rate and an engagement score that would be at or above benchmark, as well as just gaining insights on the adoption of what we were running, like the feedback on clarity for roles and responsibilities and the usage of the platform itself. In terms of design principles that we set out in 2023, and you can see it's a little bit of a repetition here because it all comes back to the selection criteria that I was speaking about earlier. The full integration to SuccessFactors was very important to us, and also making sure that we enable as much apps and ways to get into the platform and participate in the survey as possible to ensure really a good user experience, but also have as much data available to us to really look into actions that we take on a very segmented level and target those key elements that were relevant for the users and for our employees. Then next to the sort of the classical roles and responsibilities that you would see in engagement surveys, like of course giving access to full company results to our business leaders and our strategic and global HR directors like Brian. One of the key improvements coming from that organizational health survey and approach is actually Elitive's approach to self-leadership. So really giving all employees access to their own results, but also enabling them to take ownership of their own engagement is something that was a major plus for us to be gained from running the engagement survey with Eletive. A couple of key points on the survey setup. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but we set the minimum response threshold for generating a report within a team to just as low as 5, which is sort of the minimum that we could go for. But this is really, the reason behind this was really to allow us to generate as many team reports as possible while still maintaining data integrity and ensuring anonymity and protecting anonymity for our employees, of course. And also, although you can see that we set out to run the full survey for a duration of 2 weeks, we did make a deliberate choice to actually start or launch the survey midweek, which would help us ensure that it would actually span over 3 calendar weeks, and hence giving a little bit more flexibility to our employees if there were vacation periods or things to kind of look out for them to really be able to participate in the survey. And then on the add-on features, just maybe a few to mention. And again, it's all coming back to our selection criteria and what was important to us. So the kiosk codes were enabled to ensure the participation again of our offline population. And then we wanted to gain as much insights or as many insights as possible from our first survey. So we enabled comments on every survey question, as well as adding an open text question at the end of the survey. And then with the help of then the listening AI tool that Eletive offers, that helped us really facilitate looking into insights, but also for the action planning to help people managers and their teams with that. And then if we look now at the project plan, very high level, and there is a more refined version of this that we'll be sharing in the resources for anyone who's interested, because this is very holistic, of course, now. Yeah, so first of all, what you can see is that we challenged ourselves a little bit. So we sort of finished the vendor selection process and the contract signing in June. And we aimed at implementing and running the survey in October, mid-October. So it was a little bit of a crunch time for us and for Eletive. Again, we made it, so that's the good thing. But high level, we sort of put out 4 project phases that we would focus on after the vendor selection, which was the design and the design and implementation phase, which was really focused on the design principles we just looked at, but also the Works Council consultations. We are a Dutch-based company, so that was a heavy lifting part, of course, making sure that we get all the approvals in place, but also then the technical integration, which started right on day 1 in July. And then the other phase is communication and change management, and the educational phase. I'll talk a little bit about the efforts there in a second. And then last but not least, the action planning and hypercare, which was focused on looking at lessons learned and continuous improvement that we could do, but also, of course, the data analysis of the survey and what we could gain from it. So within these 4 phases, the heavy lifting, again, really lay in 3 elements. First of all, the technical integration, which took us the full 3 months, actually, to get that up and running and make sure that it was solid. And it was a fantastic team effort, I have to say, between our IT department, but also the support from Eletive. With the comms and change and education approach, it was really about making sure that we reached the right target audience at the right time. So for the communications campaign, we really focused on teaser and awareness campaigns. We had leadership messages sent out, but we also, getting closer to the survey go live, we also had poster campaigns in all our sites with actual people from the sites in them to make it more approachable and tangible. And then, of course, the second aim was to get the organization ready, not just to participate in the survey, but also to understand the importance, the benefits, and also the expectation around what to do with the results. So a little more on the change and education efforts. And 3 things maybe worth mentioning that worked really well for us. So we established and created regional sounding boards right at the beginning of our project. The purpose was really to validate our project approach and gain valuable feedback from these representatives of all regions. We connected with them prior to all the 4 project phases that you can see on the screen. They would be run by our regional culture and change managers. In total, we had over 100 colleagues, both people managers, employees from online and offline population, to join these sessions. And this was actually one of, or if not the key element to make the implementation a success, because the feedback that we received from the sessions and from these representatives helped us shape and refine our approach and drive the acceptance and adoption in the organization. As such, these sounding board members would also become advocates for the survey, and they'd be involved in many things, like, for example, taking a decision on what we would actually call our survey. So it also helped engage with them and spread the word as almost like a communications channel. We also then put a very early focus on educating HR so that they'd be able to support and take ownership. We did run two global awareness sessions in August of 2023 to really educate our HR colleagues on the importance of employee engagement. Again, the shift from the organizational health index to an employee engagement survey and what that means, and the roles and responsibilities. And then as we got closer to the survey go live, we would actually have 4 additional training sessions for HR, and again, together with Eletive, who helped us conduct these. And those would focus on the full functionalities of the platform, but also how they can support people managers and employees prior to, during, and after the survey. And then again, while the survey was running, we also offered 2 global, but also 10 regional Q&A sessions that our HR colleagues could drop into just to ensure full support during the rollout. For those interested, the scope of this was around 700 HR colleagues from HR operations, COEs, and our people services organization. And last but not least, the biggest effort actually went into, of course, educating our people managers to enable them to listen to and act on their team's feedback and feel accountable for the work environment they create. And for this, we put up the effort to train 56 trainers globally, and they conducted over 50 webinars in 22 languages for more than 5,500 people managers at the time. And really, the focus there was to educate and our people managers on the importance of employee engagement, how that fits into our company strategy, values, and purpose, and also then to explain the shift from the organizational health index to, again, employee engagement, some clarity on roles and responsibilities, practical instructions that they would need, and then also a little bit of an outlook for next steps. And at the same time, and this is what we then focused on more towards the educational phase 2 that you can see on the screen, we would have step-by-step guides prepared, but we also were heavily working on e-learnings for HR managers, people managers, and employees to really have a more sustainable e-learning and learning and onboarding solution moving forward. So that was sort of in a nutshell what we did from a project perspective. And finally, then these were also, again, in a nutshell, our first company survey results that we received in October 2023. So needless to say that we were very pleased to, of course, have exceeded the targets that we had set out to for 2023, but specifically very proud of having reached almost 90% of our population. Again, remember, we have a very big offline population, so that was a very big effort with the help of our local people managers and local HR teams to make that happen. And then, of course, looking at the results at the engagement index and the eNPS, both well above benchmark, that was a huge success for us. And we received an overwhelming over 43,000 comments that we then, as part of the hypercare and analysis phase, needed to dig into. And with that, I think I'll hand over back to you, Brian, to give a little bit of an insight of how you actually put these insights into action in the business unit that you're responsible for. So thank you.
Thanks, Sophia. Okay, so each area can probably approach action planning in a slightly different way. I thought it might be useful to just share a little bit about how it was done in a global business unit from a management team perspective. So I could summarize it in these three areas, really. The first one was about making sure, as a leadership team for the BU, we led by example. That was both discussing the team results and ensure there was a good team discussion on just the team results. But secondly, looking at the overall business results and seeing if there were some common themes to be able to communicate as areas of focus. This allows you, by doing it this way, to be able to invite the other teams to be able to follow suit, rather than just telling teams that they now have to do these things. And then once you've got that in place, really then linking it meaningfully somehow into your annual plans so that it can help to drive actions as well as improvement. So looking at number one on this list first, in terms of the three areas that we chose in our first year to focus on, I'll just touch on each one in turn. So one of the things the Eletive survey covers is around the work environment, and also covers questions around, say, code of conduct, bullying and harassment. And I'm glad to say that our results for this were very low, but because this was the first year that we ran it, we thought it was useful, a bit like how it is with safety. You may have low results, but ultimately you're looking for zero harm, was to make sure that people were aware of the importance of environment. So just highlighting the importance of the environment, which would be inclusive, to make people belong. And so, as well as highlighting the area that we would like people to potentially look at, we also highlighted what it was we were wanting to achieve at the end of it. So to make sure that people felt they could be the best they could be at work, meant that they felt comfortable to be fully themselves, so that they could belong to our diverse community on it. And this also encouraged, we openly, when we were communicating this, we openly said to managers, look, if you're getting results which maybe have uncomfortable ones on some of those sensitive areas, don't ignore them. You need to be able to pick this up to discuss it seriously. The second one was looking at an area of our results which was slightly lower than the others, and this was one around health. And coming out of COVID, health was particularly important in the environment, but it was also true that there's quite a lot of pressure within the business. So it was seen as an opportunity to really get the topic around health to be discussed within teams, and that's both mental and physical health. Ultimately, it improves the absenteeism rates, but really getting each team to have a good discussion as non-medical professions around the sort of things that trigger their health. And so we've just provided three very simple tools. One was a simple Mentimeter type poll questionnaire that teams could look at what the stresses were within their teams. Second one, slightly more advanced, just a 4-box matrix to allow people to look at their mental and physical strength and fitness as part of health. And if you're more advanced, then to have some form of overall well-being model that you could use. We use one from a mental health charity, but there are many different ones out there. And as part of this, then also just encouraging then if a one team had another sort of framework or model to use, to be able to share that and increase engagement. And the goal here was ultimately to try and increase the productivity of teams so that more healthy people can thrive in a more productive environment. And the third area that we chose to highlight was leveraging a strength. It's always very easy to go straight and look at the areas that you need to improve or the lower scores. But we saw that there was a link between one of our strengths and one of the development areas. So we had high scores in the relationships, both with managers and colleagues. But at the same time, we could see that the workload was a little bit low. And some of the things that were missing were basic bits of communication around how the teams were doing, how the business was doing during the course of the year, to be able to share up progress and updates to all teams during the course of the year. So we started a people management network just to be able to share some of the good practices of people management to help teams overall be able to become more high performing. So those are the three areas that we agreed to highlight to the rest of the BU. And it came with it then a call to action as we called it, takes two to tango. There are certain things that we can do as an overall company or as an overall business unit, which can look more structurally at what needs to improve, like policies, priorities, processes. However, that needs to be partnered with good team actions. And ultimately, we wanted every team to have a good open-minded discussion on what was happening in their team or what was in their control to be able to influence and improve. So just encouraging people perhaps even to do a start, stop, continue with the results that they had. And from that, to be able to devise actions. The third thing I had on the original chart was to make it or build it in meaningfully with the annual plans that you might have. And here, the really good step forward that we took was we built it into our BU dashboard, performance dashboard. So whatever kind of business you're in, you're likely to have some kind of measure looking at your overall top line, be it revenue or volume. You'll have something probably to do with your products or your service delivery, something to do with supply chain, particularly if you're in a manufacturing environment. And of course, if you're a profitable company, something to do with your profit measurements. And then we have two measures then in addition to these, which one looks at customer engagement, or we have an NPS score for our customers. And because Eletive also has an NPS score for the employees, we're able to then look at that and over time, hopefully also be able to correlate these sort of results. And that's really helped us also then to keep it live in the system as well. So finally, then, if you're then encouraging teams to discuss the results in their own teams and then come to actions, this is just a simple template that we then use within the business, which has the engagement score and the NPS score, and then their top three and their bottom three areas to be able to discuss, and then a simple area for people to be able to log actions. I'm sure there are many other creative ways it can be done, but if you're really starting from afresh, having everything on one page is often quite useful as a starting point, just to make it simple and visual for people. Okay, so hopefully we've provided some form of overview of the reasons we wanted to move to this survey, our experience in implementing it, a little bit around how we've used it. I wouldn't say for a moment that we are necessarily we haven't got everything right. We're still learning, I think, as many companies do. But we can maybe turn to some of the questions that have come in from some of you listening. So if we start with the first one, did you have to overcome low engagement levels within the offline cohort of employees when it comes to gathering feedback? And if so, how did you do it? Sophia, I don't know if you want to maybe have the start.
I can take it. I mean, in terms of getting them engaged to really participate in the survey, I have to say, I think all the communications and change efforts that we put in place, some of them which I shared earlier, really helped. I think one masterpiece of that was the idea to really put our own people on the poster campaign, so people would actually recognize people on the posters and get more interested. Then of course we did have the challenge to how to balance the shifts that the people would have to come out to from and how to make that happen. And the people managers on the sites and the site managers were very supportive of this. I do want to say that there might have been snacks here and there that were giving out, like candy bars, when somebody participated. So there was definitely a little bit of an element of that to it. But we had one of the highest participation rates was actually within the offline organization and scope. I think it's the action planning that was a little bit more tricky on that end, which is why we also, looking at the resources that we made available, we would have step-by-step guides on how to do action planning for online teams, but also offline teams, where we would actually section that off into 3 elements so that they could make it part of their stand-ups, looking into the results first, in the next stand-up, look at what we want to focus on next. So making that a little bit more adaptable to their needs. But in terms of participation, yeah, the efforts that we put in seem to have worked very well.
I think the other thing with offline teams is they are often then together as a cohort. So sometimes there's a difficulty because they're on shifts and it's finding the moment to do it, to create a time within a shift, but at least you have everybody together. and then making it really visible, like Sophia said, within the site as well. And the biggest thing is that then trying to build it into whatever their shift updates, so whether on a 3-month basis or so they have like a town hall meeting or something, making sure it stays alive so that they see that things that they've said actually then start to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, one other question we've got here is from Marco. When planning the deployment of an engagement survey in a multinational company, how much time would be safe to estimate for all the preparation required before launching the survey, i.e. the configuration, the communications, the training, and then afterwards with the action plans? Maybe do you want to start with this, Sophia, since you've
I would definitely
the
not
latest one?
I would definitely not recommend 3 months. I think we were very ambitious. I think it worked in terms of everything that we needed to get done to run the survey. But essentially, in a company like ours, the efforts that we then put in to support with what came after the survey, so really the essential part on taking action, looking at the data, that was something that we just needed to balance on the go, I would say, with 3 months that we had. So I would say if you can give yourself a good 6 months, that would be much more doable, and it gives you time to think about the sustainable solutions and how to support and get everything ready in one go.
Yeah, and although 6 months might feel a long time, often you've got a summer holiday or a Christmas holiday or some other form of national holiday around the world as well. So it's useful, I think, probably having slightly longer.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, then, for joining, for listening. Hope it's been of use. And of course, if there's anything really specific, then there's an opportunity probably then to connect through the platform.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks all, and have a good day.